So you never lost the programming bug, so to say.
No, I never lost it, but I'm not nearly as good as some of the people that are walking around in ball, like the male equivalent of Pipi Langkous, right? So, yeah, who was Ronald van Rijn? Java teacher was someone that worked at NASA, like incredibly smart,
cool,
incredibly smart person, but a really bad teacher. If you listen to this, then I'm sorry.
You have a special guest who has been CTO of several companies, who holds now the most high technical position at Bol. You have Ronald van Rijn as a guest. So Ronald, maybe you can introduce yourself, and we would also like to know, who is Ronald?
Yeah, thanks for having me. That's really, really cool to have like own internal podcast and to be a guest here. So yeah, I'm Ronald van Rijn. I joined Bol 4 months ago as a senior director technology. So I basically lead the entire technology organization. Report to the CPTO, yeah, who is Ronald van Rijn? So yeah, I'm a husband of Imke. I'm a father of Aiden and Bobby, two beautiful little girls, and I'm a sort of a lifelong learner and sort of challenge seeker. So I'm I guess like a little bit like the male equivalent of Pipi Langkous, right? So every time I see a new challenge and I think like, yeah, I've never done that before, or like, oh, it's much bigger than I did before, but I think I can do it. And then I will try it. Yeah. So
I love it. I've never heard that comparison.
But it's a cool one, right?
Yeah, it's a cool nickname.
Yeah, I love Pipi Langkous.
Yeah, cool. And I think it's really nice to have you today to really talk about your first 100 days, first 4 months you mentioned already here at Bol, and also to get to know you, of course, a bit. Yeah. So
indeed. So Ronald and I, we know each other. So I think like 8 years ago we worked together, both as tech leads at KLM.
Yeah.
And I met you again, and suddenly you were like CTO, and you were of course curious. What did you do? How did you get there? How did you get to where you are now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe just like where did you start from? Like, what's your background, education in technology?
Yeah. So I always started with interest in computers, right? So I think the first time I did something with computers was like one of my uncles. They had like a computer, and I think I was like 4 or 5. I was already always wanting to play games on that thing, right? And then what my parents did is they said, like every year your birthday gift is like this amount, but once in your lifetime you can choose a bigger gift, right? And so I think I used that when I was 10, and I basically asked for a Commodore 64. Nice. And so that's the first time I had my own computer. And the Commodore 64 came with like a manual, and it had like really like basic computer programs in there, right? So, and I started like typing those like from the book into the computer and seeing what it does, and then modifying it and see how I could modify it. So that was always my interest and my hobby, and so I was always playing computer games and tinking around with these things. But I always walked around with this idea, like, that's my hobby. I'm going to do something else for my work. Like this computer stuff, it needs to stay fun, right? Like if I make it my job, then it will probably not be fun anymore. That's kind of like the preconception I had. So actually, the first thing I did was like I started studying mechanical engineering. Huh. But I did that for like a couple of months, and I was like, wow, this is like really not for me. Like the only thing I really liked was like the couple of programming classes we had there. But like all the physics and all of it, I was like, whoa, it's really it's really not for me. So that's when I sort of like readjusted my choice and thought like, okay, I'm going into IT and switched to computer science study. But also there, like the start was like, like I was really doubting whether I did the right thing. Like my first Java teacher was someone that worked at NASA, like incredibly
Crazy.
smart,
Cool.
incredibly smart person, but a really bad teacher. If you listen to this, then I'm sorry. But so my first like Java class ended with me getting a 1 because I had no idea what this guy was talking about. And so at some point I got like an offer to go to the US to play volleyball for a college team. Of course, had to be paired with the study, right? So I picked computer science again, and there I had like an amazing teacher, like an older lady who basically came from like the industry and went into teaching. I think she must have been around 60, right? Like an older lady, and she was also really old school in her teaching. So she basically let us program everything on paper, right? She graded it on paper. And then only once she graded it on paper, you could put it in the computer and then see if it would actually run. But they're like really accelerated. Like it immediately clicked. Like, okay, I understand how to do this. So when I came back to the Netherlands, I sort of rushed through my study, went really fast, and started working. And then first thing I did was working at ING. Yes, I guess like if you look back at my career, it's like sort of three phases, right? So first phase was really like, okay, how do I become a better programmer, right? Like I was super interested in all of this technology stuff. So I worked at ING, I worked at KLM, I did some contracting in between. Really focused on technology. Technology was everything, right? And but at some point, like I started become adequate at programming, and then I think it was around the time where I was at KLM, where I started asking myself, like, hey, but like I'm good at programming, but it takes us like, I don't know, like 8 months to get something from idea to production. And there were all these other companies starting to kind of share information about what they were doing, and they were going like several times per day. And I was like, what's going on, right? And so that second phase of my career was much more around like trying to understand like what are these other companies doing. And so it was much less technical, right? And much more in like what approach did they use. But that became like my sort of new obsession. So I became less focused on programming, more focused on, agile software delivery, continuous delivery, and stuff like that at KLM. At some point, like together with a colleague, we even started doing like a continuous delivery roadshow, and we basically went through the company and basically showing everything like this theory and trying to convert everyone to this way of working, right? But then sort of also throughout this, like I was always convinced that I would not be a good people manager, right? So my father, he was a manager by that time at the NS, right, the Dutch National Railway, and I was always like, I'm not like my father, right? So this is not for me, right? I will stay individual contributor. So I sort of dabbled with architecture and all kinds of stuff to sort of grow in like an individual contributor role. But at some point, like I got a call that the position opened up at Marktplaats, and I basically went over, had 4 interviews in a row, and I was like completely sold. And that was the first time I actually had a team, right? So, but Marktplaats, I became sort of like this blend between tech lead and engineering manager, and I had my first team, and that's where kind of my leadership career started to accelerate, and it was like sort of like a pivotal moment there, right? Like, so I had a team, and there was this guy in my team, and he was a media software engineer. Like that was his title. but every conversation I was in, they were talking about him like he was a senior software engineer, right? And he was really senior in what he did, but everyone forgot to promote him, right? And he was like quite silent, right, and easygoing, and not speaking up about this. And then I saw this, and I kind of like corrected this, and I saw his reaction, and I was like, wow, okay, like from a leadership perspective, I can do so much more for other people. And then I started working with this team, and I kind of saw like how much more impact a team can make compared to me as a person by myself. And I thought like, oh yeah, this is really cool. And then from there, it kind of really accelerated. So at Marktplaats went really fast, like in a couple of years. I came into a situation where I led multiple teams, right? Then kind of like ran into my ceiling there and left. And then indeed became CTO at a couple of companies. And then now at Bol.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, you started off the conversation or your journey with that tech actually was a hobby from you.
Yeah.
Is it still now a hobby with these days, or is it now because now you're more into a leadership position? So I'm not sure if you're still doing coding on the side, or is it still like a enjoyable thing to do?
I really enjoy it. I don't have that much time to do it, or maybe that's not fair. I don't make that much time to do it, right? So when I'm home, I either spend like the time with my kids and my wife, or I do sports, right? My job is quite busy, right? So I kind of need to be a little bit selective. But every now and then I get the chance to do something, right? Like I either join like a hackathon or like a security hack or something like that. And then I really enjoy this, right? Like it is a very fulfilling job to create something or to make impact in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so you never lost the programming bug, so to say.
No, I never lost it, but I'm not nearly as good as some of the people that are walking around in Bol. Like it's too long ago that I focused on that. Yeah.
But you can still understand when you read the code, right?
I understand. Yeah, I can read the code, and I think that gives me like a leg up as a leader, right? So I understand very well like all the concepts, right, of programming itself, but also all the higher abstractions.
Yeah. So I think most of us can follow what an engineer does, or maybe a tech lead. But at your level as a CTO or a lead for IT in a company, what do you do? Because
what is
for us normal people, we don't have a clue, right?
What do I do? Yeah, so there is a bunch of things I do, right? I think one thing that's really important is that I'm sort of a translator, right? So like there is like at most companies I join, there is like a very big understanding or misunderstanding between like the technology part and the rest of the company, right? Often like these groups do not find each other. They're unhappy with each other. Don't understand why they irritate each other, right? So a big part from what I do is often translate, right? So I go into the management team as a new member, observe what's happening in the technology team, and basically translate what's happening there to the rest of the management team or the board or the colleagues, and to kind of take them along, like, look, if you do this is what actually happens inside that team, right? So to achieve the same result, maybe you should do this instead, right? And then technology team will respond differently, or it will fit better into this, right? So making that translation, really trying to understand what the MT or the board or my direct colleagues want to achieve, right? And see how we can make that possible. I'm first and foremost a business leader, right?
Yeah.
So I'm here to make impact for the company. So like technology is my means to do this, but it's for me to really understand and embed, like, how does the company work? How does the company make money? How is the company successful? What customers do we have? What problems do they have, right? And what do we need to solve for them? And then again, translating that back to the team is also a big thing what I do. And I think I'm continuously, trying to look at the bigger picture and trying to spot patterns in what we do, right? Spot patterns in the decisions that we make, and how can we, like, continuously improve a little bit what we're doing and make more impact.
Cool.
Yeah, interesting. It's also a really different skill, I would say, than what you probably would have done as an engineer. So is it really something that grew into you, like from experience, being able to really, read the air, read the room? I'm not sure what the saying in English is.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you've learned, or is that something that came naturally to you?
It's a good question. So I do think there are a lot of parallels with programming, right? So understanding the rest of the technologies is for a large part my background in technology, right? So I've done this myself. I understand the things that are annoying. I understand the things that will not allow me to make impact. I understand the conditions in which I could be very effective, right? And I try to create these conditions and try to help others understand how we can create these conditions. So I think that's all experience, and spotting these patterns, I think, is also a little bit like programming, right? Like building the structure of an organization. Like, how would you structure your software to kind of work effective? But yeah, it's also a lot of kind of learning, sometimes trying, sometimes failing, looking at others, how they're doing it, and trying to pick elements out of that and see how that could apply to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there especially experience really helps. I think if you've seen multiple bigger companies such as Marktplaats, but also different places, it's really nice to be able to see, indeed, as the engineering mindset, what works, what doesn't work, and how do we apply it to, the community here.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, like, a lot of patterns are the same in the different companies, right? So interestingly enough, like where Bol is now, I've seen something similar at Marktplaats before, right? And so it's interesting that companies, as they grow, kind of like run into the similar problems, right? So their experience really helps.
Yeah, indeed, and it could help us a lot, right? So I like how you compare programming to the work you do with the patterns. So you've done basically every function, from engineer to tech lead to everything else. So what do you think are the most important qualities for people in IT to be successful?
It's I think maybe slightly different on each level, right? But I think ultimately the most important thing is that you know how to get stuff done and that you can make an impact, right? I think that's the most important thing. The best software engineers I've seen were not necessarily the most gifted software engineers in terms of like their technical knowledge. They were the people that got a problem to solve, and they solved the problem in like a very effective way, in a reasonable amount of time, and actually brought results to the customers. I think that's an important quality to have, and to not lose that in the different levels, right? So my focus is still very much, how can I get this organization to deliver impact, right, in a reasonable amount of time, with really solving the customer problems, really kind of stepping the bar. So I think that kind of remains.
Yeah, especially on such a scale, right? I mean, if you have Bol has over 1,000 engineers,
Well, I think 800.
It's always hard to track, but around that number.
Yeah.
And indeed, if you were able to have these kind of qualities really stand out by people, it's amazing to be able to remove all friction so that they can actually make a lot of impact.
Yep.
So that's definitely really cool.
Yeah, and I really see that as one of the key ingredients of my role, right? Create an environment where the products and technology organization can be effective, right? Where people can have fun, where they can make an impact, create the right ingredients that they can focus. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, indeed. So, of course, you said you worked at other companies. You've seen similar patterns.
Yep.
You've worked now for 100 days, 4 months at Bol.
Yeah.
So, what are the challenges here where you will focus on?
Yeah.
What can you bring from your experience?
Yeah, or just how did you experience the first 100 days?
Yeah. Well, how was it for you?
How was it for me?
Yeah.
So joining Bol was a very pleasant experience, right? So I think what Bol has done very well over the last years is just bringing in people that are smart, that are friendly, that are open to help, right? So I've never seen such a big group of sort of people that have these qualities together. I don't meet a lot of people that are not nice, right, or are unfriendly, and so that's really good. But there is a sort of a big task, right? At the moment, Bol grew at such an accelerated rate that there is now some problems to solve that I will focus on, and so it took me some time to kind of like really understand like all the problems that are there, but I'm very confident we're going to improve this.
Yeah, awesome.
Good to hear.
Yeah, it's always lovely from here because Bol's for me my first job. So it's always fun to hear that always people are talking about our colleagues. Like, yeah, the culture is so nice. People are really working hard, playing hard, and there's this open culture of willingness to help. So it's always I love it to hear. But I'm always cautious of like, is it really like? I know we are, but I've never been able to compare it to somewhere else. But it's good to hear it again from you if you've been in a lot of companies that we're doing something good here.
It's definitely true. I can vouch for that.
Oh, okay, lovely.
Yeah, no. And maybe another thing, Ronald. So, with all your years of experience, what are the most valuable lessons you have learned during all your years of working in tech?
Valuable lessons I've learned. Poof. I guess there is like a bunch, right? So I think like as a leader, and especially now, like in a position kind of leading, well, there is something like 900 people in technology indeed, and product and technologies, something of 1,500 people, right? But like the feedback cycle of something you do is incredibly long, right? So if you're kind of like a software engineer, you do something, you deploy to production, you see what happens, right? You get like super quick feedback or from your pipeline or something like that. But now, like I put something now in motion, right? And then that will materialize in months from now or maybe a year from now, right? And then we'll see the results of that. And someone once told me, someone that even worked on a bigger scale, when I started kind of asking questions about this, like how do you deal with this, right? The fact that there is no direct feedback, and that person said, yeah, I just focus on the momentum, right? So I focus on like getting people moving, and if they're moving, I see them moving in the right direction, even though the results are not there. I'm happy, and my job is to just keep the momentum, keep people moving, and at some point, like they will get there where you want them to be, right? And that's my feedback trigger. So that was, I guess, like an important like lesson for me, like what to focus on and what to get energy from.
Yeah, I think that's indeed a powerful insight. If you make this transition from direct contributor to enabler, that's the thing where you get your kick from, so to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also sounds pretty hard though. Like, I'm just curious, like, again, like, is it in nature for you that you're able to easily give away that kind of control? Or because personally, I know a lot of engineers, for them, it's quite hard to be able to say, okay, now I'm not involved anymore. I'll do a step back and I will have, I fully trust, of course, on my team, but it's always hard to lose a bit of control. Is that something you've dealt with as well when you started off here? Or was it something that, you just build?
Yeah. So obviously I need to give away a bunch of control, right? So there are like 900 something people here, and they're smart, right? And they're there to solve problems. And I have no illusion that if I do all of this myself, that we will get a better result. But I will build in stuff that gives me at least some form of control, right? Like, so in the way of working, where we'll also go with ball, right? There will be sort of like moments where I get like information from all of the teams on where they're doing, how they're doing, right? And I will also try to guide the teams on like the problems to solve. So I have an idea of that they're working on the right stuff, without like being like the person that decides everything, right? But I guess to answer your question, it is a bit something to get used to, right? By nature, just as a person, I'm super impatient. So yeah. Like having to wait for something for a year is quite difficult for me, right? Yeah. So I really focus on that momentum and bringing stuff into motion and making sure that they're like checkpoints where I kind of see like what's going on, where do I need to steer, right? Because I need at least some form of control to get to the results that we're looking for.
Yeah, indeed. And so I know that your hobby is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah, it's just a totally different thing than what you're doing right now. But I was wondering, are there concepts from your hobby that you also use in your work, or the other way around?
Yeah. So if you think about it, it's not that different, right? But you need to think about it on a certain level, right? So I am someone that's continuously looking for a challenge, right? I have no problem putting myself into a student role and learning something. I really enjoy that, actually. So I try a lot of new stuff, right? And there is often this thought in my head, like it's a shame that life is so short. Otherwise, I would have like done like astrology. I've done like physics. I would like do all these stuff because it's like super interesting. And it took me a little bit growing up, right, to get an interest in that. But now that I see it, I think like, wow, this is really cool. I would like to learn about all of this, but I don't have the time, right? But I do the same thing with sports. So I've played volleyball for a really long time. Sort of quit cold turkey, and then I started doing like a whole bunch of other stuff, right? And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is just one of those challenges, right? So I've never really done martial arts. I think I did Taekwondo for like 2 weeks at some point. But other than that, like never really did the martial arts. And it's a new challenge for me and a new thing to learn. So in that sense, it's very a repeating pattern in my life, right? I think the thing that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu kind of taught me is to be comfortable in a super uncomfortable situation. and that takes some time, right? Because the first training and someone's on top of you, you're like in panic, right? And you feel like your body wants to just get away from the situation. Your breath like goes through the roof. Your heartbeat goes through the roof. But over time, you start to learn like, oh, this is super uncomfortable, but I can hold it for a little bit longer, right? I will look for an exit, or I will try to get away, or if worst comes to worst, right? Like I will tap out, and that's fine. And I do think I bring that back into other stuff now, like being comfortable in like a super uncomfortable situation, being able to endure a little bit longer.
And can you tap out?
Can I tap out? Yeah, so in life it's a little bit harder to tap out, but yeah, it can happen, right? So it can happen sometimes. So Maite is my boss, and I go to Maite, right? Like, I need your help, or I need your perspective on this, or like I'm stuck, right? Yeah. So that's in that sense, I guess, a little bit like tapping out of the role.
I have a mental image of Maite strangling you in a jiu-jitsu hold. You're like,
Next space is
tapping out.
But it's a valuable lesson. Maybe we should also give it a try.
Let's try getting strangled by a 2 meter big guy.
So of course I'm like sort of advocating for my own thing, right? But I would definitely encourage you to try it a couple of times, right?
Cool.
Because I think it's such a good experience to understand that I'm in super uncomfortable situation, but I know how I can help myself, right? I know how to get out of this. I know how to control myself, my emotions, and
And it sounds like you're actively looking to seek discomfort a bit, like in finding new challenges. Is there already something you're having on back of your mind or your bucket list? Something I still want to
as a next
learn?
one. As a next one.
Even more challenging than getting strangled.
Even more challenging. So I just started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? So I'm still white belt. When I train, and I train against blue belts, purple belts, brown belts, like it's clear, like they're so far ahead of me, right? Like they beat me like this. It's like so I will stick around for this for a little bit longer, for sure. So see how far I can get. So I think this for now is the challenge that I need. But it can come very quickly with me, right? So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was there at some point, like, right? But really quickly, like, I will try it. Looks interesting, right? And I did something similar with CrossFit a couple of years ago, right? So a documentary, so like, let me try this and see how far I get. And
I think when you go into it, you're like a really fanatic. I remember the time that you were at KLM, you were like a fitness person, and you were eating 5 eggs a day or something, and really, really like 100% into it. And I think you're doing the same thing now with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Like, I'm gonna beat you, mister. Wait, in the 3 years, you will be mine. I can see it in your eyes.
Yeah. My wife calls it like my hyper focus. So when I'm doing something, I'm doing it, right? Like
it's like
so when I'm doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm also watching YouTube videos of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Listening podcasts of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm like really immersing myself.
Nice.
But I do the same thing with other stuff, right? When I was working on all of this continuous delivery stuff, I was like reading everything, watching everything, listening to everything. Convincing the KLM people to bring Just Humble in for a couple of days.
I remember that. That was awesome. The guru. He really is. If you haven't never seen anything from him, I recommend watching his stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Made really change. So I was thinking, do we have a really difficult question for Ronald?
A really difficult one.
Because he likes the challenge. He just told us.
He likes to be in discomfort.
He likes to be in discomfort. What is a really uncomfortable question we can ask?
I don't know what's uncomfortable. But I'm just curious. I don't think it's uncomfortable. I'm curious, what's your next challenge here in Bol? What are you going to solve in the next 100 days?
And you can ask the helpline. We have here a phone for you if you want to.
My next challenge is
if you want to call your wife or something.
Call Maite,
Maite
to ask for my
what
next
are we
challenge.
Up
to? So my next challenge to solve. So the challenge ahead is super clear, right? So Bol grew really hard. The landscape grew really hard, and with that came inefficiencies, right? And my challenge ahead is to get into kind of like an efficient operating model with technology, getting all the teams to make impact, make it very clear where they're making impact, measure that, yeah. So that is my main challenge at the moment.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting after a while when everything has worked out, that you maybe come back and tell us what you exactly have done and what the results were, just as an inspiring lesson for other companies maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I would love that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, cool. And for myself, I have to Google now I know Jiu-Jitsu, but what is Brazilian from Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah, so Jiu-Jitsu is basically Japanese martial arts, right? And at some point, like a Brazilian family took that to Brazil and started kind of changing the sport. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is much more, I would say, less formal. Right, so it's kind of what you expect when something goes from like super formal country like Japan to Brazil, where everything is much more relaxed. So it's much more relaxed, much more free, but also I guess a little bit more focused on results in a sense.
Nice.
Yeah.
I see a lot of parallels.
I think I'll be getting back to how Ronald is wired.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
it was really cool. I really liked getting to know you better a bit today.
Yeah.
Also learning a lot about Jiu-Jitsu. And learning what you, of course, are doing here in Bol and what you're, where you originated from, your history. Yeah. So really want to thank you for being here today on the podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Yeah, and you invited us to experience Jiu-Jitsu, and I see you're open to it. So after this podcast, you can put you in a chokehold just so you can experience the discomfort, I think.
I'm not sure if I'm going to agree on that one.
Okay, we'll talk about it later. Yeah. That's fine. But thanks a lot, Ronald. Really nice having you as a guest.
Yep, happy to be here. And I would love to join again in a couple of months from now to talk about the progress.
It's a date. We put it already in our agenda.
Good. Super cool. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.